What is up, my dudes, and welcome back to the channel. This is Old School Kekistani, and today I have for you another SPELLBREAK video. If you've been watching my latest videos, you'd know that SPELLBREAK is a Battle Mage Battle Royale game currently in pre-alpha being developed by Proletariat Incorporated, and it's shaping up to be quite the banger in the Battle Royale genre. For more information on the game, please click on the icon at the top right and watch my introduction to SPELLBREAK where I covered the details. But let's get back to the topic at hand. 2 weeks ago I uploaded a video explaining the different types of gauntlets, their mechanics, and their unique playstyles. Today, I thought I'd go a bit further into the discussion and rank, in my opinion, which gauntlets are the best and which ones aren't. Keep in mind that this list is going to be ranked under the following conditions. The first condition is the most important, and it's that all the gauntlets will be ranked in effectiveness with the average SPELLBREAK engagement. This means it doesn't matter whether you spot someone far off and get snuck up on in close range, or have a mutual engagement at any range. None of this will be taken into account. All that will be taken into account will be the general effectiveness at any range, and also versatility with movement and spell interactions we currently know with the NDA in place. The second condition is I will not be discussing gauntlet effectiveness in terms of classes or any synergies with classes. To do so, I think, would violate the NDA placed on the game and jump too much into legal liability on my end, so let's not get into it. I will go more in depth with classes and gauntlet synergies with classes in the future when the NDA lifts. The third and final condition is I will not discuss any gauntlets with any rune or item synergies for the same reasons as before. For those of you who have not played SPELLBREAK yet and do not know what runes are, I will be making a video on those shortly. But nevertheless, runes will not be covered in this video, so do not worry about them too much for right now. With these conditions in place, I should note that if you are a current SPELLBREAK pre-alpha tester, then you should take this list with a huge grain of salt, as some classes are built to cater to certain playstyles, and some gauntlets may be better for you than the average generalized list that I provide here. Also, even though I know a lot about these gauntlets from playing the pre-alpha, in order to stay within the NDA, I will have to limit the kind of info I give on the nuance of each gauntlet. Don't worry, I will make another one of these lists and more accurate guides once the NDA lifts, but for right now, let's get into my list ranking the gauntlets of SPELLBREAK. In the number 6 slot, we have the Electric Gauntlet. As I mentioned in my Gauntlet guide, this gauntlet is perhaps the most like your general FPS games in the sense that the projectiles shoot super fast, almost like hit scan, and they more or less provide consistent damage at a consistent output. This gauntlet is decent when you want an easy hit at mid-range, but the hit doesn't do a whole lot. The damage is low and lacks any decent burst potential from the gauntlet's kit. For those of you who don't know what burst potential means, it's basically how quickly a move can do damage to give the opponent the least amount of time to react and counterattack. The low burst potential of the Electric Gauntlet gives a whole lot of time for enemies to get away, or even worse, turn the tables because your damage isn't high enough. Imagine you get the jump on an enemy in the open. There is nowhere for him to go. You open fire on the guy with an Electric Gauntlet and he zooms away with a teleport to heal, or he turns invisible to then pelt you with stone or toxic. You can see the problem with this gauntlet. Even if the primary isn't very good, surely the sorcery must be worth something, right? Well, the Lightning Storm AoE is actually visible to the enemy, and while it does stun, it's pretty much worthless if the move can't land in the first place. Sure, I'm not going to take away the good amount of spell interactions that can cause stunning, but overall the gauntlet is very weak and lacks any use beyond being a low DPS stunning machine without any meaningful burst potential. Therefore, the gauntlet takes the lowest spot at number 6 on my list. Next, in the number 5 slot, I'm going to have to put the Toxic Gauntlet, and I can already see some testers getting up in arms over their favorite gauntlet. Let's get a few things straight. It's an amazing gauntlet in close range. It has some of the best DPS in the game in close range. It has some of the best burst potential in close range. You may see a pattern here. This is a close range gauntlet. Close range is all this gauntlet is meant for. It has virtually no presence in mid-range or long-range fights, and unfortunately mid-range fights are the majority of SPELLBREAK encounters from what we can see. And while yes, it does have some of the coolest spell interactions with fire and electric, making Dragonfire and a Toxic Cloud of Stunning, all of those are really only going to be used, again, in close range. With this limited range and lack of movement options, I really don't have any choice but to keep this Gauntlet at the number 5 spot on our list, but you should definitely use it in close range. In our number 4 slot, we have the flashiest Gauntlet in the game, the Frost Gauntlet. This Gauntlet faces the same type of problem as the Toxic one, in the sense that its effective range is very limited to long range. Don't get me wrong, it's very good at long range, easily the best Gauntlet equipped for the task, but like the Toxic Gauntlet, it has only that one range. It could be argued that this Gauntlet is very good at mid-range combat, but from what we've seen in SPELLBREAK highlights, there are many options to mix up movement and visibility, and the Frost Gauntlet's projectile speed just isn't quite fast enough to make up the difference, making mid-range viability a bit of a stretch for the Frost Gauntlet. In many ways, the Toxic Gauntlet and the Frost Gauntlet are very similar, but Frost has two things that place it above Toxic. For starters, its kit covers both long-range and close-range engagements. While Frost's primary behaves mostly like a sniper rifle, its sorcery does the complete opposite with a close-range AoE that freezes the opponent. While this doesn't make the Frost Gauntlet much better, it does give it an option that overtakes the previous gauntlets on our list. In addition to this, the ice slicks that are made by using Frost allow for incredibly fast movement across short and long distances of the map, and give the Gauntlet a unique feature in that regard. I think that the Frost Gauntlet serves its niche very well in long-range combat and movement, but there's a reason it's a niche and not applicable to the wide array of circumstances that SPELLBREAK can bring. For this reason, the Frost Gauntlet stays at the number 4 slot. Taking our number 3 slot is a bit of a curveball in the Wind Gauntlet. Now, I know I'm going to have to explain myself a bit here. Some of you will agree with me, some of you may even argue that the Wind should be higher on this list, and then the rest of you, probably the vast majority that watch this video, will ask why such a weak Gauntlet is this high on the list. Let me clear the air here. This Gauntlet is not this high on the list because of its damage. It's just not. Wind's primary fire takes way too long to cast and does too little damage to even be in the same arena as any other Gauntlet in the game. Even its sorcery does very little damage even when paired with spell interactions. In addition to this, the spells casted by the Wind Gauntlet are so easily avoidable that it's not even worth attacking with. I'm sorry, I kinda got personal there for a second. Let's get back to the ranking. The reason this Gauntlet is so high on the list, despite its awful damage, is its amazing utility. One move commonly used is firing the primary wind spell on the ground to launch the caster very high into the air. Doing so makes it possible to reach heights much higher than a double jump, and makes getting a vertical advantage on your opponent only one click away. The thing about the Wind Gauntlet is that it is so useful in every engagement you come across. No matter what situation you find yourself in, having a higher position than your opponent grants you a huge advantage. From a higher position, your Fire Gauntlet has a chance to inflict AoE damage by crashing into the ground instead of flying to the moon. Your Stone Gauntlet sorcery has more time to build and hit more accurately without having to worry about the arc of the toss so much. And your Toxic Gauntlet is free to rain down poison from above instead of pathetically failing to gravity. I cannot stress enough how important height advantage is in this game, and in any game for that matter. You can see it in every highlight from some of the best montages. Height advantage is super important. Even the sorcery can launch you upward as well, so the Wind Gauntlet is well purposed in verticality. Because of this huge boon the player has with height advantage in combination with other gauntlets, the Wind Gauntlet takes the number 3 spot. Coming in for our runner-up, we have the Stone Gauntlet, and it's easy to see why. Damage, damage, damage. This gauntlet is meant to hit like a truck on the ground. In direct contrast to the Wind Gauntlet, this gauntlet has zero utility but makes up for it in grounded DPS. The burst potential on this gauntlet is very high, and it's seen finishing fights very easily with enemies getting deleted very often in highlights. Not only is the gauntlet super high in damage, but the range on this gauntlet is pretty insane as well. The gauntlet's range on the ground leaves room for it to be a close to mid-range threat. The trade-off for the high damage, of course, is the gauntlet is completely grounded, meaning that you have to be on the ground to cast it, and it only hits targets that are also on the ground. This limits stone in a huge way and makes the Wind Gauntlet a literal hard counter to any playstyle using stone. But besides the primary fire of the Stone Gauntlet, its sorcery is where it really shines. Launching a giant boulder at the opponent is always fun, and thanks to the Stone Gauntlet, it's almost always effective. Stone Sorcery is easily the best in the game, providing an excellent engagement tool, finishing move, and really just overall damage dealer. As long as you hit your targets consistently with Stone Sorcery, there's very little your opponent can do unless they have an immediate getaway option. A good way to counter this sorcery, however, is the same as we mentioned before. A good Wind Gauntlet user can pretty much ruin your day, and anyone wise enough to keep their distance will probably have a distinct advantage as well, picking you apart from afar. In addition to all this, Stone offers no utility or movement options out of its primary or sorcery, leaving you a sitting duck if your opponent plays around your weaknesses. In terms of spell interactions, there is one very notable synergy with the Fire Gauntlet, which I'll touch more on in a future video, but by setting up a flame wall and firing Stone's primary spell through it, there seems to be incredible potential for insane burst damage. Overall, Stone is an amazing offensive tool offering high damage, the best sorcery in the game, and an interesting interaction with the Fire Gauntlet. However, its lack of movement options and its glaring weaknesses keep it from our number 1 spot, making it the runner-up on this list. Finally, we've reached our number 1 slot, and by now you probably know which one it is. That's right, we have Fire taking the title of Best Gauntlet in Spellbreak, from what we can see. Fire has just about everything you need in an offensive gauntlet. It has great damage, a good variety of offensive and defensive applications, and some of the most versatile offensive spell interactions. Its primary fire is very simple and straightforward, and this is actually one of its best assets. The Fireball from the Gauntlet's primary spell deals great damage when it directly hits, and even if it doesn't hit, there's still a chance to deal some AoE damage from the Fireball's impact. The Fireball can be used in a wide array of circumstances, whether it's in close or mid-range. I've even seen use of the Fireball in long-range combat, but it's not very reliable due to its low projectile speed. The damage of the Fireball relies on those direct hits, so if a player can predict their opponent's movements and consistently land their shots, then the fight will be over very quickly. In addition to the primary fire, the sorcery that Fire brings with it is very versatile. The Firewall can be used both as an offensive tool and a defensive one. The most commonly seen use for this is laying down a wall in front to then blast through it with the Stone primary spell. This combo, like I previously mentioned, has the potential to generate lots of damage in a short amount of time and can leave the opponent with nowhere to escape under the right circumstances. The Firewall also provides defensive support in the form of area denial in close quarters, making it viable in a lot of different situations. Besides the interaction with Stone, there are also many other interactions for Fire. Now with such high damage potential, there needs to be some downsides, right? For starters, like I mentioned earlier, the projectile speed of the Fireball spell isn't very fast and can be reacted to. Oftentimes, if you can see one coming your way from mid to long range, you can probably sidestep it. Another downside to the Fire Gauntlet is that it doesn't have any movement options, and I guess that's not that big of a deal since only 2 gauntlets have notable movement in Wind and Frost, but you can always slot another gauntlet in your other hand to make up for any weaknesses, and that's true for every gauntlet. Back to the Fire Gauntlet, it is, in my mind, the premier gauntlet to run in Spellbreak for its high damage and versatility, and it is well deserving of our number 1 slot. If you're still watching by this point, thank you for sticking around. If you enjoy this kind of content for Spellbreak and want to see some in the future, even though we have to tiptoe around the NDA a little bit for right now, then please consider subscribing to the channel and clicking the like button if you liked the video. I also have a Twitch channel at twitch.tv/OSKekistani, so feel free to stop by and leave a follow if you'd like. And if you'd like to be a vocal part of the community, then please consider joining the Discord server and following me on Twitter. All links are in the description. Also, all clips in this video were taken from the official Spellbreak YouTube channel, and that link is down below as well. Alright everyone, that's going to do it for me today. Have a great one, and I'll catch you all next time.